How you doing? I'm Doug Devaney and you're listening to the Plastic Podcasts, Tales of the Irish Diaspora. And this month marks our 3rd anniversary. 3 years old. Just imagine, your favourite diaspora discussion platform is nearly old enough for nursery. In our time, we've outlasted COVID, 3 Prime Ministers and 45 interviewees. And now we're on to number 46. No time for birthday cakes or anniversary reveries for us, oh no. Which is a pity, because Emma O'Rourke is a specialist in memory and translating it into art. A fine artist combining drawing and painting, Emma uses archive material, both personal and public, to create fresh new abstracts, both reflecting past reminiscences and provoking future imaginings. Her most recent show, Vessels, took place at Willesden Gallery and was inspired in part by the Brent Museum archive of Irish migration to London. But let's move to matters of memory later. Instead, let's begin, as ever, with the present by asking Emma O'Rourke, how you doing?
I'm doing good. I'm good. I was thinking actually I needed to start with I need a kind of anecdote or like a interesting story to tell you, but there's not much apart from I've done the school run this morning. Um, there's not much else to give you really. I'm writing a newsletter if that's of interest
For whom?
for me. Well, for my mailing list.
When you're actually reviewing what you've done or where you've been and so forth, is it kind of, this feels really weird because I know what I've done, or you're looking at yourself and your work not through your own perspective?
Yeah, it is weird. I think that in general now about I think that's the being in the arts industry and the way you almost have to you have your work and then you're essentially marketing it in a certain way on social media because you have to put it out there and then come to put together a newsletter you're talking about it's hard to separate sometimes what you should talk about and what you shouldn't talk about and what's of interest especially as well because you've got different audiences and people might follow you or be interested in your work for different reasons. So it's like how much you give away about what you're doing, how much people are going to be interested in, say, the research side. Are people going to be more interested to come to a show you've got going on? But it is weird. You have to sort of look at it from from an outside perspective to sort of see as well what you have done. The other thing is I don't think when you're doing things, I don't think you always necessarily see them as things that you're doing, if that makes sense. So you're almost doing the things. You just they're so obvious to you that you're doing them. You have to kind of, for me personally, I just do everything through photos on my phone. So I just go through things per month and say, oh, that's what I did. I just photograph everything because otherwise I just can't remember. That's probably more my memory than anything else. But yeah, so yeah, it is strange, I think.
But speaking of memory, of course, memory was very much central to the project that you've done recently in Brent.
It was memory was a big part of the project. Yeah, I think in general with the work I'm making now, I'm more interested in memory as a feeling as opposed to the exact memory. And I think that about work that I showed at Vessels last year. So the show came about from I moved into a studio at Second Floor Studios and Arts in Wembley Park in September 21. And it was a few months later that I started researching at the Brent Museum and Archives in Willesden Green Library. And I was researching the history of Irish migration to London from about roughly the 1940s onwards, in like particular that area of London, so northwest London. And that's where my family migrated to. So it started, I started kind of the research and then I was going through my own family archive of photographs. And then alongside of that, I was making lots of like drawings day to day. And the show was last November. It opened at Willesden Gallery, which the archive is upstairs. And the show really was all of that put together. So although it felt like it was all the research and the work I've made alongside and images and documents and stuff from the archive, it very much felt like, for me, the start of the project. It was like the start of putting it out there, seeing what the reception would be, and then using that to think about how I would take the work forward. But I feel like the work is very much based around stories and people's experiences. So it really needed that. It needed to be put out there, I think, to be able to, for me to like fully be able to see it myself as well. Yeah.
Family was huge in the pieces that you displayed.
Yeah, family was a big theme, and so I can, yeah. So my mum grew up in mainly in Willesden. They moved around a little bit, so she was in Willesden, and they were in Harlesden when I was born. But both her parents moved to London from Mayo. They got married in Willesden in 53, I think it was. And then my mum and her three brothers, yeah, they grew up in London. So they had a very traditional London Irish upbringing of going home to Ireland for the summer, but living in London, sorry. And it was very much like, I think it's just particularly that area of London at the time. It was, most people around them had Irish parents, and it was a very like big Irish community. And a lot of my nan's sisters were here as well. So yeah, they had like a big community around them. And then my dad was born in Portlaoise, and he moved over to London in 85. Yeah, and then he met my mum, and obviously he stayed. But yeah, so I think so their experiences was probably where the interest in researching Irish migration to London came from, really. I guess it's always been about, trying to like find your identity amongst that. And it's I've kind of grown up with, I've had a very traditional Irish, like Catholic working class upbringing, but and I was born in Brent, so I was born in central Middlesex in 87, and we were in the area till I was about 4, which moved a bit further out. But yes, it's been sort of, it's only when you get older, I think, and it's mainly since I had my son, that I realised I had more of an Irish upbringing than I was aware of. I think especially when you go to all Catholic school, all your friends have also got Irish parents or Irish family. So it just feels like that's everyone. And then obviously you get older and you experience like more of the world, and you realise not everyone is Catholic, which I really didn't. That was actually quite a big shock for me, because I really thought everyone was Catholic for a very long time, which is which is crazy. Um, I do remember, actually. I remember meeting someone at uni who was Christian, and I was really confused by the difference. It just never really occurred to me. But yeah, so everyone was very similar. So it's only it took kind of that as well. I think it took me leaving home, moving away, and then kind of coming back to the area to make me see it differently, really, and be interested in that, and be interested in this idea of what it means to be not British, not Irish, just kind of, yeah, somewhere in between. And that really is where the exhibition came from. It's the idea of being displaced, but more as a, I think how I worded it in the press release, physiological state, I think it was. So you're not either or, and you're somewhere in between, but you've got the experiences of where you grew up. And then you've got a lot of what you, especially from in your younger years, you're very much a product of what you're told by your family, and that's where your belief systems will come from. So yeah, that's really where the interest came from, I think.
I'm rapidly coming to the conclusion that diaspora is a separate identity in and of itself.
Interesting. That's really interesting. It's definitely the more work I've done on it, and the more stories I've heard, people do, like you said, there definitely is a sense of people really connect with other people that have experienced it. And like you're saying, that in itself feels like, regardless of what your background is or where your parents are from, it feels like there's a similar sense throughout. I think with people that have that feeling of the idea that you're kind of searching to find yourself within that, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Going across your parents, actually, because their story is slightly atypical in as much as your mum is second generation.
Yeah.
And your dad is first generation, having come across and so forth. And
Hmm.
most of the Irish family stories that you hear, mum and dad meet having come across around about the same sort of time, or that they are
Yeah.
second generation together, or this sort of thing. So your mum has this very typical, it's like London Irish upbringing of the family holidays across to see the folks back in Ireland and so forth. And your
Yeah.
dad is the folks back in Ireland. I mean, it's impossible to really say, I'm sure, because your life is your life and you don't know any different. But it's like,
Yeah.
was there a sense that there was a kind of like a slight imbalance there or difference there when it comes to like sense of Irishness?
Yeah, I think there definitely was. I think one of my main memories of both my parents with the English Irish thing was my mum's would always be just for the example that I'll give that they used to say was my mum would always say the weather was so much worse in Ireland. And that was like that was a kind of a big sort of theme that I just remember conversations about that. Like and it would really annoy my dad. So I think my mum had a much more of a leaning towards um where she'd grown up, essentially, like in London. Um, but then she would be very quick to say that if there was something, if there was sort of a difference or something, or a family did something that we didn't place like particular importance on, or at least they did things a slightly different way, my mom would say it was English, so we just couldn't like relate to it, or it was just a different. It's like that's how it's a different way of doing things that we don't do it like that. So she sort of, so I don't think in a way she doesn't realize how Irish she is. She still doesn't actually, because I've had this conversation with her. I obviously had a lot of conversations with her about it in general since I started doing the research, and it was then when I said to her like she's all Irish, like both her parents are both Irish, but she never really, yeah, she's definitely very connected to London, I think, where she grew up. Um, but yeah, there was definitely a split there with their two different experiences. Um, and I think, but I think my dad had that separately, with the sense of he had the idea of, the kind of those that stayed, those that left, and a lot of his family stayed, and obviously a lot did leave as well. So my dad was from some really large family. There's 13 of them, so there was a good portion of them obviously stayed, and then a lot of them left. But he probably still has that now. It's that feeling that you're when you go back, you're not you left, didn't you? So it's but when you're here, you're always, it's not your home, and it never would be home. Whereas my mum, this is home for her.
You're listening to the Plastic Podcasts. We all come from somewhere else. Find us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and Threads. Born in Brent in 1987, Emma O'Rourke's parents got together during that time in the late 20th century when Shane MacGowan and his band dominated the musical landscape of London Irishness. Pitting hope against hope, I wonder if her mum and dad might have got together at a Pogues gig.
That would be great. No, they met in a Irish bar in Willesden, opposite the station. It's now Sainsbury's, and it was called Nellie's. And I did find it actually in the archive. I found a tiny little flyer from Nellie's, because not many people have heard of it. The really famous one was the Gouty Moor, which I'm sure you've heard of. Everyone used to go to the Gouty Moor, which they also did. But yeah, they met in Nellie's. But when my dad first moved over, he lived in I think he was in Streatham for a while. He moved over with his brother, um, and then eventually, yeah, he ended up in Willesden where they met. I think my mum did go to a lot of Irish bars and pubs and things.
So they met at Nellie's.
Yeah.
Was their eyes across a bar? Did they know friends?
I don't know actually. My mum, my mum's never drank. My mum's like completely teetotal. My dad was probably very drunk. And I remember the only thing he told me about the night they met was they went around the corner and my mum had I think it was a red Fiat car. They showed a car, and I think my dad's immediate thought was, "Oh my god, like she's got loads of money." But of course she
Got a
didn't.
car.
She's got a car. Um, but yes, it's just because my mum was always a driver because she didn't drink. But but yeah, I don't have much more. I know they had. I know I was born relatively quickly afterwards. Um, but I don't have much. The only I've heard a bit about when my dad came over. I think it was around the time of Bruce Springsteen as well, and that kind of era. And yeah, my dad's always been a Springsteen fan. Just very, very 80s, which I do enjoy 80s and 80s music, and yeah, sort of has memories of like my auntie and uncle's weddings and like the VHS and songs they'd play.
Such as.
I'm not going to be able to remember the song. There's a certain song from my auntie and uncle and I was a bridesmaid. Um, I'm not going to remember who it is, but whenever I hear it, it's like right back. Not so much back to the wedding. Can't remember the wedding. It was the VHS tape. I remember sitting in my nan's living room and watching it. Which again does relate back to the interesting thing with memory, where my memory of it is the construction of it, and the way I even remember the slides from the video. They like you never see that done now with wedding videos. It was like their wedding, and then they had like they would like zoomed in the two slides of them as children, and then they kind of had the montage of like photos when they were going out and stuff. It was a really great wedding video. And I remember the music from the background of it. But yeah, but the actual wedding, I don't have any memory of. I think I would have been maybe 3. So yeah, it was more the memory of watching it. But yeah, I can't remember the song. I'm sorry. One of my one thing I really want to do in the next couple of years is do a proper trip over to Ireland and hire a car and go all around Kildare. Because I think my dad his dad was from Athy, um, and they lived in Kildare for a bit, and then he was born in Portlaoise. But I only found out fairly recently that my nan, who I thought was also from Kildare, she was actually from Cork. She's from Liscarroll in Cork. Um, and then I can't remember why she was in Kildare, but my granddad was I'm trying to think the right term. I think it's a smithy. She used to make shoes in Kildare. But yeah, I'd like to go back there and find. I thought that actually a lot when I was listening to the Mick Ord podcast. And he talked really greatly about how he went over there and he was staying in the hotel and they drove him down. They drove him to find it was like a family relative, and like someone and the people in the shop that were talking about the relative knew they had never actually met them, but they knew them.
Yeah.
Do you remember that? But yeah, and I thought that was really interesting actually, and there definitely is.
Michael Toohey.
Yeah, it's and there's I definitely think that's quite an Irish thing of there's a real sort of if you've got that Irish connection, which I really felt as you've been doing the exhibition, especially with the little bits I did, the little bits of press and stuff I got from it, was I found that the Irish press were really supportive, and I thought that there's a nice sense of even though I've been born in England, there was having that kind of having that connection. They really you just feel very welcome, and you feel like there's a genuine interest. I think in your family and where you're from, and like there's an importance in that. I think that's what you can't get from. I'll never get from living here because I don't have that connection to it. It's just that there isn't any sort of roots for me to look up or feel the connection to. And I think that's the draw really now. As an adult, I say that as probably more as in a different stage of my life after having a kid, and I feel much more like I want to go back and see it in a different light, not just in a like where can we go out kind of thing.
So yeah, your mum meets your dad, and she has a Fiat, and
I hope I've got the right car now.
and a year that otherwise we're going to be bombarded with all kinds of stuff like
it's going to be outrage.
Yeah, no, I'm home for a sponsorship deal. Let's get it right. And A year later, you're born. Are you the eldest of a number? Are you the only child?
No, it's just me. It's just me.
And so as you're growing up, and obviously
Yeah.
you're sort of developing the memories, as you say, it's like looking at your folks' wedding over at your grandma's place at the age of 3, and that creates like memories and so forth. I mean, do you remember when you first decided I want to be an artist?
I was always, I was quite a quiet child actually. You know? I was always drawing, and I like stories, and I think that's I have a lot of memories of my dad telling me stories when I was younger, and especially ones about, I think Bill and Ben used to feature quite a lot, and he does that now actually with my son. He's really just great at telling stories, and he can just tell a story really easily. So I think stories were definitely a big part, and I think also as a child as well, you're probably drawn to things that you're that are well received. So at school and things, if you're, you know, you draw a lot and, you know, people like your drawings, and you're going to be, you know, told they're good, and that's going to make you like want to do it more, I guess. But my degree was actually in theatre design, and that was kind of the coming together of the two. So it was like, because I was also really like reading, so it was like the stories and then with the drawing. Um, but yeah, that was, I think so. I think stories have been the biggest theme, and then I guess art was just an obvious choice really to go alongside it. I think I remember writing in year 6 when we did some extra religious lessons. I don't know what they were. We were preparing for something. I can't remember what it was. I remember writing that I wanted to be. I think at that time, I think I said I wanted to be an interior designer, which is kind of crazy now. But then that was like year 6. But I always liked art. I like music as well. But yeah, it was. I definitely was interested in like creative subjects and inner worlds, I think, which is still a big theme of the work I do, and how you can have like quite a rich inner world, regardless of where you are. But I didn't grow up in a arty household at all. Parents had, yeah, they weren't in any way. I wouldn't have gone to galleries or anything growing up. There would have been no sort of exposure or anything like that to it. I remember I had a little red table, and we used to put my paintings up on the wall. So I can sort of, and I remember really liking. I remember getting a pack of Crayola pencils for Christmas from Santa, and that being like that's like a big memory. I just say I really like treasured things that had anything to do with like drawing or yeah, all my like those kind of things.
So, what did you do as a child, as a family?
As in like days out and things.
Yeah.
Oh, that's a good question. I've never asked me that before. Um, we used to. I remember we used to go on holiday. If we went on a holiday, we used to go to Devon a lot. Um, and we'd go to kind of, we wouldn't go to like I don't really go to a gallery. We might go to a museum of sort of like the local area or something, or like kind of souveniry sort of shops and like little kind of like little villages, I guess, and stuff like that. But I can't. Yeah, that's a good question. I definitely don't have, which I've thought a lot about actually, with the theme of memory. I don't have. I have more. I have feelings around periods of time, but I don't have strong kind of this happened then sort of memory, if that makes sense. Um, but yeah, I remember I remember, yeah, we would do, I guess we'd do like days out and things, or we would go to, and we're going out on my bike, and we did kind of outdoorsy stuff, I guess. Um, but yeah, I can't really, that's a good question. I can't think of like particular places that we went, or yeah, I just know that we didn't go to galleries or anything like that.
Was it coastal towns you go to?
Yeah, sometimes. Yeah, we would go to coastal towns. I remember everywhere we went on holiday, my dad always wanted to move to, like, wherever it was, which I kind of understand now. I think I've got in touch with that. Um, Although holidays are obviously different when you have a kid. So, but I was always, yeah, I would have been. I had a few memories going to the theatre actually, and on holiday. I remember I went to see the BFG, which I really enjoyed. But yeah, I would have been quite a. I'm trying to think how I would describe myself as a child. There would have been a lot of books, and I definitely went through phases of being like really into certain things. Flower babies was a big thing at one point. I don't know. There was like a book on them. Do you know about flower babies?
I don't.
Don't. It was just. I think it might have been in year six, and we all made them. Um, yeah, it was just flour essentially. I think they were in tights, and it was your baby, and you could have had like a little face on it. And I remember we all used to keep them under our desk. Um, they were a big thing for a while, but I think that was just like the time of like growing up in the 90s. There were certain fads, and then there was a point where everyone had a Tamagotchi. That was a really big thing, and then a yo-yo. There was yo-yos at one point. Um, but yeah, and I have memories as well of going to like family gatherings and things like that. My mum's got three brothers here, and they've all got two children, so I've got quite a lot of cousins here, and there was always like christenings or communions. So there's quite a lot of like family events that we went to as well.
We'll be back with Emma O'Rourke in a moment. But first it's time for the Plastic Pedestal, that part of the podcast where I ask one of my interviewees to pay tribute to a member of the diaspora of personal, cultural or political significance to them. Today, local journalist and writer Declan McSweeney talks about Liverpool-born Irish Republican, socialist and trade union leader James Big Jim Larkin.
Jim Larkin, I suppose, is a figure who unites Britain, Ireland, and to some extent the United States, in the sense that he was born and bred in Liverpool, spoke with a Liverpool accent, but he was probably the dominant figure in many ways in the evolution of the Irish trade union movement. And he also then, of course, spent time in the United States, was involved in the unions there. So he is a figure that continues to inspire both the Irish trade union movement, and he's also very much known in Liverpool and very much remembered by many people there. He's a lot of he was someone who sought at the time of the divisions really over the Dublin lockout. He was conscious that that was taking place against the backdrop of sectarian divisions, and he sought to rise above that, to bring people together, whether they were Catholic, Protestant, whatever. One of the he spoke about, for example, he went against the grain in some ways, in the sense he ran a temperance crusade, and he realized a lot of guys were wasting their money on drink, so he tried to do that, and he was on record as saying he got a lot of support from the Methodist and Presbyterian churches there at the time, and I think that's one of the things that will be remembered, his legacy of sort of bringing people together.
Declan McSweeney there. And if you want to hear more of what Declan has to say, why not listen to his full interview? Just go to the episodes page at www.plasticpodcasts.com, click on Declan's name and photo, then let the full McSweeney wash over you like a warming river of truth. And while you're there, why not bathe in our other veritable network of interviews, all 3 years' worth, also available on Spotify, Apple Podcasts and Audible. But while you're still there at www.plasticpodcasts.com, why not subscribe? Just go to our homepage, scroll down to the bottom, click on the link, and one confirmatory email later, you can surf the diaspora tsunami like a champion. Dude. Now back to Emma O'Rourke. And having talked of both memories and of childhood, I wonder whether becoming a parent has altered her as an artist.
Yes, definitely. Yeah, 100%. I've always done like creative stuff. I did a lot of like different projects really in my 20s, and I did a lot of different jobs, as most people do. And then I went self-employed, which is the only thing I've stuck at actually. And yeah, I was involved in various like projects, and I did theatre stuff, and festivals, and I used to do a lot of drawing. My work was quite different though. I used to do very sort of it was like pencil drawings, and they would be very accurate, like trying to sort of what's the word, like a realist kind of interpretation of like a photograph or a person, or they're very sort of neat pencil drawings. And then I'd say it completely changed with completely really from having my son, and there were also COVID was a big part of that as well. And I think we were forced to, up until he was about 18 months, I used to take him to we just used to go to exhibitions really in London, and I was out and about a lot with him. And then COVID hit, and we were obviously all in for a long time. And that was when I enrolled that year at the Essential School of Painting in Wood Green, and I started doing crits with them, and that was all done online. And that really changed my work, and I think I just became a lot more expressive, and a lot more sort of I just became a lot more interested with expressionism and the idea of things as feelings, and sort of just as opposed to trying to recreate something, just making the work as you feel it. And I think that also comes from having a child, in that time to work. There's very rarely that you'll get like a day to do something. And my son only started school in September, so I've really worked in sort of like blocks of time. And I think I work now quite quickly. And I think with that, especially with drawing, I find it a lot more interesting and a lot more expressive too, especially if you're drawing someone, to do that quite quickly and to get a sense of them. And I think that's come from just logistics really of time and situation, like where you might be if you're drawing or making something. And I feel a lot more satisfied with looking at the work I've made since then. And I feel like it has just a lot more feeling in it, I guess, because there's no time for something to be overthought, overworked, because you're making it in response, and it feels a lot more honest, I think would be a good word.
So would you say you become much more instinctive as a result of that?
Yeah, instinctive. That's a good word. Instinctive, and not as, I think that in general, actually, about having a child in general, I think I became a lot less self-conscious about putting work out there. So I guess it's definitely given me confidence that I wouldn't have had so much in my 20s. There would have been a lot more kind of, is this the right thing, or should I do this? And I think it feels a lot more natural now to make things and put them out there. And then also feel that, then obviously you start to build like connections with other people, and people that have like similar experiences, or might also have children, and you connect on that level. But it doesn't feel as it feels a lot. It's ironic, because I think once you have a kid, you obviously have a lot less time, and you wonder what you did with all the time before you had a kid. But actually, I feel like it's become a lot more easier for me to make work, and I feel like I use the time I have better as a result of it, because it's a lot more structured in the only way it can be.
When we were talking a little earlier, you talked about and you referred to our interview with Mick Ord, and how when he went across to Knock, he was taken down to a local shop, and a woman there, the shopkeeper's daughter, kind of had a recollection of somebody that she'd never met. And this is that kind of oral history aspect of that is very much part and parcel of Irish culture, much more so I think than of English culture or of British culture, or at least it seems to be more prevalent. Let's put it that way. I'm getting round to a point here. Don't worry. I'm just going round and round here.
No, I'm interested what you're going to
say. So am I. Trust me, we'll both be surprised. But I was talking with a friend recently, and he was saying how myths and legends, and particularly when they're oral myths and legends, can change from town to town, from place to place, and so forth. And he's talking about Greek oral legends and Roman oral legends and myths and so forth. But there's a permanence when you put something down on a piece of paper. but more importantly is the fact that like oral histories tend to change and so forth with the time, and I'm wondering whether or not once you start to have this instinctive reaction to your own memories, and an awful lot of your work does work itself around your own personal archive or photos or memories and so forth, does your own reaction to those memories change once you've actually put it down on paper?
Yeah, I think it does. Yeah, I think it does completely. I think especially it's been interesting. So the show, the show I did at Wilston opened in November, and it was great to put it together, and it was really great to see it all, and have that as a sort of, I think just even being able to see all your work in one place together. But I felt very much, I found it quite hard to talk about it actually at the time, because I felt like I couldn't see it. And I think that in general about things I make, I think I still think I'm processing it now. It's been, well, it hasn't really been that long, really, has it? It's not been that long. It's March now, so, but I feel like I'm getting there, and I think I'm, especially just even like reflecting, and I'm also putting together, which is part of the newsletter that I'm plugging. I'm putting together a blog of like the experience of making the show, and kind of how it was then and how I'm experiencing it now. But it's very hard to see the work, I think, when you're making it. And a lot of, because you're generally working with, so I'm either working with sketches I'm doing day to day, sketches I'm making from archive material, it might be photographs, or I might sketch something from like a museum. And then you're putting all those bits together, and in your mind, you're making something that is all those bits coming together in one image. And then actually when I reflect back on it, say I might look at something again in a year, all I can see in that image is the period of time I made it, and it feels very much like it doesn't represent the memories I think it did. It represents exactly that moment, basically, or when I made it. So I definitely think the things I'm putting into things in there, and I guess that's that makes work contemporary, is you're only ever making something really which is the present. So it's never going to be an exact copy of the memory you think it is, or what you think is going into it. And then the other side to it as well is I made a piece. I made one piece for the show actually. It's a painting called Devotion that I've posted recently on my Instagram, and I've reworked it since then. And put more. I made more sketches from. So generally, if I work from a photograph, I'll make sketches of the photograph, and then I'll work from the sketches. So I made more sketches, and I sort of thought more about. I thought a lot more about the environment the figures were in. It's of two figures, and the first time I made it, they'd sort of appeared, which I've been thinking about a lot recently, because I often make images of like one figure, and it's almost like a vision, but they're often you're not really sure where they are. This was two figures, so I was thinking, okay, we need some sort of environment for them to be in, so we can understand them together. So I put more into it, and you can kind of see they're in like a dating sort of pub scene ish, and then you can kind of see from their body language that they're together, but they're not really together, they're not facing each other, which is central to the theme of this idea of two people being together, and what, if you think of marriage, what like devotion is when you choose to be with one person, and then how relationships change over time, and that you people might be together, and sticking by each other is an achievement in itself, but it doesn't necessarily mean they're together in a traditional sense, that they're not. The relationship, there's something there that is not sort of, yeah, you can see from their body language there's something's missing. But the colours in the painting are very warm, and there's a lot of oranges and red tones, and so it feels quite warm and optimistic. And yeah, I've since put it out there, and one of my friends commented on it, and she made that observation of the warmth and the optimism there. And it was so interesting to see, because she got bang on what it was, and I found even me myself, it was hard for me to see that. So it's like when you put work out there, sometimes somebody else will see it from their own perspective, and they might see something that you put into it that you weren't even aware of. So I find that, and that's why it's really nice to show work and to get other people's opinions on it. But I definitely found from doing the show that I really valued all those conversations I had with everyone that saw the work and everything that they brought to it. And that really, again, it brings another dimension, another memory to the work, because you're adding on all the different layers, but it's very rarely the memory you started with.
That's what I was going to say. Memory's kind of malleable on that front, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely.
That you talked earlier about, it wasn't that you remembered specifically things so much as a sense of the thing that you remember.
Yeah. And I think, no, go on.
No, Karen.
No, I was going to say that is a lot about, I think, especially with childhood, when your memories are more hazy, and a lot of memories I have are sort of, there's a warmth there of feeling like safe, something, but I can't tell you why that was. Or just there's a sense of things, and then obviously all the different things that happen to you throughout your life, you very much you're left with a feeling of how you felt during that time, and that can obviously change as well as you might get more information about something that happened, but it's all the different, as you're saying, all the different bits add on, and they can change the memory.
I'm going to jump on a word that you said there, which was safe.
Mm-hmm.
And that sense that there was a period in your time when you felt safest,
Mm-hmm.
or that you look back on it with a slight sense of safety.
Yeah.
What kind of period would you say that was?
When I say safe, I see it as, I remember feeling that there was always warmth, there was always food, and there was always, so like I moved around quite a bit with my mum and dad when I was born. We lived in various flats, and we lived with my nan and granddad for a bit as well, but I don't remember that, so I was too young. But I remember I always felt safe in the sense of, like, there was always, like, the very basic things, like I've said, like warmth and food. I always remember that, and I think that in a way has come from not a memory, but a story or a memory I have of my dad, and he'll still talk about now, is when he was growing up, they didn't have that. He very much they grew up in poverty, and they didn't have food. He would remember being like starving hungry, and they weren't warm. They used to put all their coats on top of the bed to try and stay warm. And he talks about one big house he grew up in at one point, and they were, freezing cold. And he very much had. So I think that would have been important for me not to have experienced that, that feeling of not having, or so I guess when I think of it, I think of feeling warm, and I think that's a memory, as I said, from my own childhood, but it's also added on the story of my dad's upbringing. So it's like two memories put together. But I can't remember a particular age. I don't know. I guess that young, say like 4 or 5.
You're listening to the Plastic Podcast's Tales of the Irish Diaspora. Email us at theplasticpodcasts@gmail.com. Memory, as has been noted by others far smarter than yours truly, is an inexact historian. It is deceptive and easily deceived, convincing yet malleable. In this last part of our interview, I begin by wondering whether working with her memories, and those of others, has changed Emma's relationship with the act of remembrance.
Yeah, I think it can go two ways when you're working with an archive. Actually, I think, whether it's a archive, like a physical archive you go to, or your own personal archive, I think it can either be rose tinted, and you can take out the good bit, or it can become, you're only interested in the darker side of it. And I think that has played a big part in working with memory. And if you look at it from an Irish perspective, it's very much had a lot of conversations with this with my friend Etna, who I can give a shout out to on the podcast. She, who is a psychologist, and we talked a lot around with in general with Irish stories, you get the light and the shade, and that it's always both. There's always and you can look at it like in comedy and especially from Irish like comedians and things. You've always got that within, like, generally in Irish families, you've got stories which there's a lot of sadness. There's a lot of sadness there. And then there'll be the other side of it. There'll be the flip side of it where you might make a joke of it, or there'll be a good thing. There'll be a good, what's the word? Where something comes good in the end, sort of thing. So you're sort of, that might have happened, but then that was how we saw it, and then that was what happened. And I think that, so from working from memories and from objects or photos that have those memories, sometimes it depends really on the day which bit you might take from it and what like lens you might have on it and what you might see in it, and then you'll take that bit and you'll make something from it, and then that will change it again based around how you were feeling at the time. And I think a lot of the stuff and work, I guess, the themes that I put into things made in recent years, they will have, and I'll probably be able to see that more in later years, but a lot of them do have themes around women and being a mother, very, very much where I am now, I guess, without me really realizing it. And I think a lot of those, especially looking at themes from the Wilson show, a lot of the paintings were named after women. And I have thought a lot about Irish women and, the kind of the lack of opportunities that there were, and also how my memory of women growing up and going to a Catholic school was very much like there was only really two women. It was the Virgin Mary, or it was Eve. So you were either the Virgin Mary, who was, sort of this perfect white. I remember having a dream about Mary when I was really young, and she like a white tunnel with her, and she was very. She was kind of, what we were told to believe was, the best thing essentially. And then you've got Eve, who was at the other end of it, this tempestuous and everything kind of that was, sinful. There wasn't very much in between, and people don't really fall into this good or bad category. Everyone has crossovers of each within them. It doesn't make them bad or good. It's just, we are as we are. I think everyone is made up of lots of different parts, and that, I think, the memories of that and the memories from school in particular, and the teachings of, from the Bible and stories of women within the Bible and how they were portrayed, very much, painted my picture of what women were. And then the bits I'm putting in now is more my lived experience of how it is. So I think I've gone on a tangent from your original question, but in general, I think that fits together with the idea of how the memories change, and how something you put into something will then become a new memory.
When we were discussing this conversation in our previous things, you talked about this sense, this working class sense that people like me don't do this sort of thing.
Yeah, I talk about that a lot. Yeah. I still think about class a lot. I still talk about class a lot. I talk about it a bit on social media. And I came from a very traditional working class background. My dad's a carpenter. My mum was a childminder for most of my childhood, from what I remember. And people, there was no option to be an artist. I still think it's a struggle. I still think to do something like this, especially, which I know we spoke about, it's not necessarily about the lack of all the obvious things exist. So you obviously don't have a family connection doing anything. So you don't have the You don't have the money in a way another person would to be able to work for free or do whatever you need to get to a certain position. You don't have there's not as many opportunities, and especially now, I know there's a lot more opportunities now, and there's a lot more paid internships, and there's a bit done, not loads, but there's a bit done to try and help people from different backgrounds get into the arts. And the arts is still like massively middle class. Most people came from, most people I speak to didn't grow up in working class families. That's just a given. But the biggest thing for me is your internal dialogue and the way you talk to yourself. And I still now, I definitely have more confidence in myself. I think I said since I became a mum, for whatever reason that is. But I still think, this isn't for me. All of those things still exist. And the problem with the arts is it's obviously notoriously not well paid. It's not secure. There isn't a straightforward career path. It doesn't work. If you work really hard at something, it doesn't mean there'll be any financial gain from it. It is never, and you also might get to a point where you receive recognition for something, but it doesn't mean you feel it yourself, because for whatever reason, you've already got your own sort of how you view yourself. So it doesn't mean you're going to take that on board and feel anything from it. Which I've definitely found it's hard for me to do something and feel. People might say, "Oh, did you feel proud of that or something?" I think I don't know. I'm not really like that. I don't know. It doesn't really come. So I think all of those things still exist in your mind, and I think that very much is a class thing. And I think I've seen that in how you view yourself or doubt, or even how you're able to, from quite a young age. I think I was really aware of that. It's like selling yourself, and I found that quite uncomfortable. It's something you have to sort of, I think, push through, but it definitely doesn't come naturally to me to put myself out there in a lot of ways. And there's still always that thing in the back of your mind that says, this isn't a proper job. It doesn't go away. It doesn't. And I do think it's largely based on class.
Last couple of questions. This is just like don't consider this will be put down as your personal biography or on record forever, but it's just instinctive answers. Okay.
Yeah.
So, what's the best color?
Knicker pink.
It's what?
So when I was at uni,
did you just say knicker pink?
Yeah. When I was at uni, I used to do a wash over everything I did, and my tutor said it was knicker pink, and it was a kind of a pale knicker pink essentially. So that stayed with me, and I still use it quite a lot actually. So yeah, knicker pink that's my.
Did you go into a shop and ask for knicker pink?
No, you definitely can't. I actually think the colours I use now are probably slightly more vibrant, but I still like that kind of washy pink. I like orange as well. But anyway, let's go with Knicker pink.
Right, you are. First song you ever heard that you liked on the radio?
Oh God. First song I heard on the radio that I liked. One of my first memories of music was our CD player. I had to question them what it was called because they're just not used now, are they? Like, no one has like a CD player. And my mum used to play Beautiful South. There's a song where it's like, she's a perfect 10, but she wears a 12. Save a little 2 for me. What song is that?
Perfect 10.
It's called Perfect 10, isn't it? That was one of the first songs. I remember my mum used to write down the lyrics. I don't know why, in like a notebook. And I remember the little bit at the beginning of it. I remember liking that song. I don't know if that's my first memory, but we'll just go with that.
Friend of mine's in the video.
Really?
Yeah. A fellow called Steve Murphy, no longer with us now, sadly. And last question, which is the question I ask all of my interviewees, which is, what does being a member of the Irish diaspora mean for you?
It means having a place and having a sense of identity and community and other people that get it, I think. And I felt more connected to my Irish heritage since the more research I've done and the more work I've done and the more I've owned the identity, I think I've felt more connected, but also there's been a more of an understanding of myself and my family and why things are the way they are, why things are said, why people act a certain way. Everything just makes a bit more sense, I think. And it makes me feel like I'm part of something bigger, which is really important.
You've been listening to the Plastic Podcasts with me, Doug Devaney, and my guest, Emma O'Rourke. The Plastic Pedestal was provided by Declan McSweeney and music by Jack Devaney. Find us at www.plasticpodcasts.com. Follow us on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter or Threads, or email us at theplasticpodcasts@gmail.com. The Plastic Podcasts are a proud member of Irish in Britain.